Michelle Marie McGrath.
Hello and welcome to today's very creative episode of Unclassified Woman with the fabulous Laura Hollick, who I've been dying to speak to for ages. Laura is an award-winning artist, shaman and visionary guide based in Canada. After walking 10,000 kilometers on a vision quest, Laura clarified her purpose and dove into realizing it. She is the founder of Soul Art Studio Incorporated, a business devoted to circulating love around the planet with creative inspiration. Bravo TV created a documentary about Laura's art and life called The Artist's Life, Laura Hollick. Laura has also hosted and produced over 500 radio shows on 93.3 FM, CFMU called The Artist's Lifestyle, and she's also created a TED Talk called You Are the Art. Her art and insights inspire audiences all around the world with her global events like the upcoming International Soul Art Day, the Global Vision Quest, the Yoni Art Project, which I love, and the new Icon movie. So I really hope you enjoy this conversation. We talked about the menstrual cycle, creativity, sexuality, really working with the power of the womb space and what it means to be a fully expressed woman. So let's get into this fantastic episode. So hi Laura, welcome. So excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
And wow, I hardly know where to start. There's just so many things I want to ask you about your work, about the nature of creativity. And so let's start with a really big topic for so many women. Please tell us how you got into doing your work with the Yoni art.
Well, I guess it goes, right back to birth, really, but I wasn't conscious of it at that point. But I will share a little bit of the story of me as an artist, which is really how I then got connected with this idea of the Yoni.
Yeah.
So for me as a kid, I was very imaginative. I felt very disconnected from my family. I mean, they were lovely, but I didn't feel like I knew how my soul could really show up in this world. And so it was very confusing. And the way that I coped with that was retreating into my imagination. And as I started to grow up, I realized that my imagination was like my home for my soul. And I thought if I could make my imagination real, I could have a home here.
Wow.
And so I started to create art really as a way to create a home for my soul.
Beautiful.
So in the process of realizing that I could use art as a way to make my imagination real and give myself a home on this planet for my soul to arrive, I really started to learn about how creativity works and how does creation work? How does something go from invisible to reality? Like how do we make things? How do we birth things?
Yeah.
So I just, from a very, very early age, was really exploring that. And I never really made the connection that it was connected to my womb or yoni because I started as a kid and I didn't have the consciousness of that. But as I started to grow up and, into adulthood, something just drew me to the awareness of that. And I'm like, wow, I'm really working with the womb and I'm working with my capacity to birth things. And it was so interesting. The other day, I was at a Rolfing session, which is a type of body work. And as the woman was like moving the fascia, which is Rolfing moves the fascia in the body, she was moving the fascia around my pubic bone. And she hadn't seen me for over a year. And she said, wait a second. She goes, I feel something on your pubic bone. She goes, have you just given birth? I only feel this on women who have just given birth. And I looked at her, I was like, no. And then we were talking about it, and I realized that I'm actually birthing all the time through my creations, through my art. And it's not like I'm birthing like physical babies, but I am birthing projects and visions and ideas into reality. And so my physical body actually responds as if I am birthing. It was so fascinating, from someone else's perspective, to feel my body and to notice that. And so that just kind of further enhanced the idea of like, wow, I'm really creating things. And my yoni and my womb is my body's like physical connection to that energy of creation.
Yes, and that's such an important point, because so often in our society and culture, we really only often associate the womb with often painful, uncomfortable, or embarrassing experiences that we've had that are related to sexuality, or it's all about having a baby as a physical child. But there's often a bit of a disconnect in terms of just seeing ourselves as creative beings just because we're alive and that we are part of the creation process. So often people will just think, but I'm not creative, I can't draw, or they'll make that kind of association, which is in a much more of a surface level, not realizing that it's so much bigger than that, the whole process of creation.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's so true. And I think that that's a changing point in the consciousness right now, that women are recognizing that their role is not just to be a wife and birth babies, but that they actually have the capacity to create things. And if they choose to create babies, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But they can create anything that they want. And I think that is, when I look at our world, and we always talk about this idea of the new paradigm, the new paradigm is going to be born through a creative process. It's going to go through a creative process. And in our consciousness, women are coming into this understanding, this awakening of their power. And in that, I believe that's the way to the new paradigm, because as women claim their power to be creators, they can create new worlds. They can create new money systems. They can create new careers. So there's so much power as women, and anyone really taps into the understanding of creation.
Absolutely.
And learns how to work with it. Yeah.
And so, Laura, what do you believe are some of the biggest blocks that we have in connecting with our creative power, and how can we move through those and transform those blockages?
I think that in our energy, there's often blockages because there's something in our past that, like a trauma of some kind, that is unresolved. And so it becomes frozen and locked into the body. So the circulation of life force energy no longer has a clear channel. Yeah. Because let's say, when we're a kid, mom yells at us and we didn't know how to deal with it then. And so in our thigh, we hold this little bit of fear of like, oh my gosh, someone's going to yell at me. And then we're like 30, 40 years old and we have to go and send an email to, announce our creation, our business, or whatever it is. And we're like, oh my gosh, who's going to yell at me? And our body tenses up. And so a lot of the blockages, they seem illogical. It's like, well, why am I scared of what's going on? And really, it's just something in our body hasn't been fully processed. And so there's often a healing journey that is the first step of creativity. Yeah. Because creativity itself is actually something that is carving into the future. And so in order for us to do that, we have to be at peace with the past. Yeah. Because our soul, our psyche doesn't let us go forward when it's kind of being yanked back by something else. So there's often a healing that I witness in myself and in my clients that we go through in order to be in the present moment, where it's like, okay, from this platform, now I can create. So blockages can be things that, it's just like fears that come up, and it's unique for everyone, but it's all wrapped around the same idea. There's something unresolved in our energy, and then it crops up in unusual ways, like what I described, a simple thing like, oh, I'm scared to send an email. Yeah. And it's like, and then we feel like we're procrastinating or we're holding ourselves back, and well, why, and it makes no sense. But what we need to do to resolve that is to be present in the moment of when those fears come up, so we can start to melt the freeze of those things. But in order to even get to that point, we have to create safety for ourselves. So we feel safe that if this thing melts, oh my gosh, can I handle what is actually there? And so this is where I feel we actually can learn how to create a womb for ourselves
Yeah.
and create a container for ourselves where we are safe and that we actually can like drop into that sort of fertile womb space where we're held and we can let like wisdom hold us. But when people, if they were in a womb and they didn't feel safe, maybe in their mom's womb, maybe she was stressed or whatever, then they're already in resistance to being held. So even just creating the safety to go into the healing sometimes is an issue.
Exactly.
So, we can, yeah. So we can kind of go in circles with that. But I would say the main thing is that there's things that are unresolved, different traumas, things that we just didn't know how to deal with. And then they create these blockages in the body and they stop our potential, and they stop it for wisdom. The wisdom is that our soul's like, wait a second, you've got something to learn here. Something was unresolved. Something was unprocessed. And this is part of your story and part of your journey. So we don't actually want to move forward on a soul level until this has been resolved, until we've learned and received the nutrients of that experience. So it can be annoying at the time, right? It's like, well, I just want to get going with my life. I want to, make money or have a boyfriend or move into wherever, do all this stuff. And yet our soul is like, well, wait a second, you're here on a journey. You're here to learn stuff. And there was something that happened and you haven't learned the lesson of it yet. You haven't received the gift of that.
It's so true what you say, and it just makes me really think of that's why inner child healing can often be so important, can't it? So many of these like creative wombs from childhood. And I was just thinking about, for example, some of the structures that we have which don't support that creative flow of the individual, like our school systems. We're from a young age, we're set up where we are being compared against each other. And then we're taught to believe them from quite a young age that, maybe I'm not very good at this. And I was just thinking, I remember art class was one of my favorite classes at school. And I used to just completely immerse myself in that. And then when I got to about age 11, 12, that's when we started being graded and having very specific projects. And I remember once having a project where we had to do this kind of pencil drawing, which was not my strong point, but I hadn't really worried about it up until that point because I just always used to be so immersed in whatever I was doing, and I loved painting. And I just remember then getting these like marks back, and it was the first time I'd actually then looked at what everybody else was doing in the class and then immediately went, oh, okay, I'm not very good at this. And so then afterwards, I kind of dropped that class. And it was really about reading the comments and the feedback. Okay, you need to have more of this. And obviously it wasn't enough of a replica of whatever it was we were trying to draw. And I just thought it's really interesting how damaging those experiences can be. For people, and often they don't even remember that they've had these experiences. So sometimes they don't know where the block or the fear comes from because it's so deeply buried that they can't actually remember an event or a trigger point. And this is where the confusion can come in, isn't it?
It's true. And that's why if we're confused about what it is, typically it's because we need to create a safety container for ourselves that if we do remember and if we unearth this trauma, that we are safe and we can handle it. We will be held. There's loving wisdom and care available for us. So there's a safety. And so I find really clarity creates movement. And so when we keep ourselves unclear, it's because we don't want movement, so we can keep ourselves in a cloudy haze because clarity actually can feel dangerous. So it really comes back to what do we need to create safety for our soul? And it's interesting because when I was growing up, going back to my original thing that I shared about my childhood, I understand that feeling of what you described. People are comparing and what's going on. I was confused by this world. It didn't make sense. My soul felt scared of that kind of judgment. It felt scared of just the lack of recognition of the soul. And so I had retreated into my inner world, and then I created my imagination in reality to create a container for myself. Essentially, I made a giant womb around myself.
Yeah.
And it's funny because now today people will often say to me, they're like, wow, you're just like a giant womb. People who come around me for any amount of time, either they're getting pregnant, they become super fertile, or magical ideas come through. It's just like, it's the energy around me, it's very fertile and safe because I created that
Yes.
in order for me to feel safe to be here. And really, we can all do that if it's something that we desire to do. But, if we are getting blocked and it feels like we don't understand why, then the first step I would recommend is ask yourself the question, what do you need to feel safe in your soul to be able to have clarity on what's going on in your life?
And also safe in your body. So
Yes.
it can even be that, it's so important that you say about creating a womb space. So I've said this often to clients, if they're feeling very disconnected from their womb and that part of themselves, then create a physical replica of that around you. Like, what would be something that would represent that for you that you can look at and focus on, even if it's a beautiful little altar or a special place in your home where it's a safe, sacred space for you to just sit and contemplate. And even if you've got like beautiful flowers or something that represents that feminine energy for you, so that you're fostering that increasingly strong connection and focal point. So it's so important, like you say, and just about, creating that sense of nurturing that, it's safe for me to connect with this space.
Absolutely. It's interesting. So I teach and lead a class and a course that's called Yoni Art. And it's a creative journey to connect with the soul of the Yoni. And so Yoni, if that's a new word, if you're listening and that's new to you, Yoni is a word that represents the physical anatomy of a woman's sexual center, as well as the spiritual aspect of a sacred gateway to divine feminine energy. And what was really interesting in the class, so I kind of dove into it thinking, okay, we're going to learn about creating the womb space and, all the different yoni gateways and all the different initiations involved in this and the divine feminine energy. And everyone got into that and it was awesome. But then a lot of the questions, very interesting to me, that were coming from the women in the group were really around the divine masculine. They're like, okay, so we've got this whole, we know how to connect with our divine feminine energy and we understand that. And now how do we actually connect that with the divine masculine? So it was interesting to see how once we create safety on one level, then the next level just starts to open up. And that's what I mean by clarity creates movement.
Yes.
And so if we don't feel like we're ready for that kind of movement, like, whoa, that's too much to handle. Oh my gosh, I'm not ready for the divine masculine. Then we slow it down to allow our soul to give ourselves what we actually need in the moment. And sometimes being unclear is what's healthy for us.
Yes.
Because, that's what our soul needs, just to kind of rest. And I do feel like it does start with, like, if you're a woman, it starts with us as women being able to connect with ourselves and have our own sense of grounding and center. I feel like it really does start with our own connection with who we are. And even within us, we have a divine masculine. So it's not even that it's always external. But when we identify as women, then that's like a great way to enter the center of your being, with what you understand of yourself.
Yeah. And then obviously when that, creative connection and when you're really created to that part of you more strongly, that naturally flows over into your sexual essence, doesn't it? There's a very strong connection between creativity and sexuality and how that flows together in a beautiful partnership. And one of the things that I read, one of your comments, which I loved, is a fully expressed woman is an orgasmic woman. So if someone's having issues connecting with their sexual energy and not experiencing much orgasmic pleasure, for example, what are some of the ways that you believe are helpful to power up that creative essence so that they can start to really work with that and experience a shift with it?
When I think of that fully expressed, that means I'm honest with myself, meaning if I have a desire, I know what my desire feels like, and I recognize the energy of my desire. It also means I know what my truth is. I can recognize the feeling and sensation of my truth. So that'd be like the first level, just the recognition, like, what is it that I feel? And then from what is it that I feel, it's like, okay, do I now have the ability to let that come through me? And typically what people do is they edit it to accommodate someone else. So that's not fully expressed. As soon as we've sidestepped our desire and our truth, we're not on the track of the energy of our life force. We have disembodied and sidestepped it. And so the orgasm can only exist on our energetic track. And so if we're like disembodying from that or sidestepping it, it's like we've gotten off the path of our capacity to be in our own flow. So, the first thing is just really looking at, well, what is your flow? What does it feel like to have desire? What are your passions? Do you honor them? Do you act on them? If you have a feeling inside, do you speak it? Do you voice it? If someone says, hey, do you want to go to the movies and you really don't want to, do you say no? Or do you say yes? Things like that. That's a fully expressed person, one who what they feel inside matches and mirrors their actions and what they do on the outside. So then the orgasm is just like a natural, like orgasm is natural.
Yeah.
I truly do believe that. And so when we're not experiencing that, it's like, where have we denatured ourselves?
Yes.
Where have we denatured and being able to look at that. And I feel like a very orgasmic woman, but there's also areas where I've denatured myself. And in those areas, I'm not orgasmic.
Yes.
We all have areas to learn and grow. And so there's no shame in that. It's part of the journey, but being able to look at that and receive the gift and the opportunity to explore and be curious. It's like, wow, why do I change my behavior in this certain situation? Why do I know my truth inside, but then I say something different when I'm faced with this kind of situation? And usually when we dig in there a little bit, we're kind of afraid of something. And so we edit ourselves to accommodate some kind of survival need or need to be loved. And, it's just things to look at and to learn and be compassionate with ourselves and curious. And the orgasms are already there. And I don't even think our life is meant to be in a constant orgasm. I think another level of orgasm is just that we embrace all of our life. And sometimes that means we embrace the block. I mean, that in itself can be an orgasm if we really allow it, if we let it in, because then it becomes part of our path. It's like, I'm not resisting this. This is what I'm learning right now. And then there is a pleasure. There's a pleasure to that.
And it's just like the natural cycles and seasons of life, isn't it, really? It's reflective of that.
Mm-hmm. For sure. It's so true. The seasons match and mirror the creative energy, creative cycles. When there's a winter, there is a reflective time. And, when spring happens, like, oh, a burst of new ideas. In the summer, it's like, wow, it's all happening. It's all growing. And, so all the different seasons, they do reference phases of our creative cycle. When we allow them to be where they are, they all have their beauty.
Yes. Yeah. But isn't it interesting how often we are keen to rush through certain parts of the cycle, or I suppose it's kind of funny of like some people, they just love summer and they don't necessarily appreciate winter or autumn, but it's just part of that natural cycle of growth, death, birth, rebirth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true. Everyone's unique and learning our own seasons. And I live in Canada, so winter is part of my life, right? And so I'm a very reflective person, and I like spending a lot of time thinking about things. And so I'm really comfortable with that winter energy. But I know other people who are just as happy in their creative process, and they don't need as much reflective time. They don't need as much winter. And so everyone's unique, but they'll be in their own cycle. They'll have their own rhythm. And I guess the point of it is really just to give yourself permission that it's not always about being in one state of happiness or one state of an orgasm. It's that all of it is part of the whole ecosystem of creation. And when we allow ourselves to be in that whole experience, that's a bigger orgasm because it's just like, oh, like this is life. I'm alive. I'm experiencing things.
And do you notice, like with that, talking of cycles, I was just thinking about then the connection with the menstrual cycle. Do you notice a correlation between how your creative energy is flowing with certain times in your menstrual cycle?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'd love to dive into that. Before I go into it though, I want to add something that I feel is so important and relevant, and that we all have a cycle. And in a woman's life, she has a phase of time where she's bleeding. So it's like in her adult, years of potentially having a physical baby, she bleeds. But then there's childhood where there's no bleeding. And there's also menopause where there's no bleeding. But all throughout, there's still a cycle. So I just wanted to start with that because a lot of times women get scared. They're like, oh my gosh, if I go into menopause, like, am I going to lose my creativity? Am I going to be out of the cycle? And I still am bleeding, but all the women that I have worked with who are in menopause, it does not affect them at all.
It seems to be even more creative for some women.
Yeah, and it depends, right? It's all about your ability to be conscious of your energy. So it's not always connected to the blood. Although when you are bleeding, you have a tangible way to reference where you are.
Yes.
And so we actually have an advantage. It's like, oh, if you're bleeding, it's like, then you can actually see, it's like, oh, wow, I'm in this phase of my cycle here. My body is telling me. But when you're a child or you're in menopause, then you're really just tuning into how you feel. You don't have a physical marker in the same way. So I just wanted to start with that. So if anyone's listening and you're in menopause, it's like, you're not excluded from the conversation. But I will definitely go into the idea of the blood, and also it can be referenced to the moon as well.
Yes.
So in our first day of bleeding, that's like the new moon, and that's like day one. A new cycle is beginning. And a lot of times people think that their cycle actually begins when the blood ends, but the cycle actually begins when you start bleeding. So that would be like the new moon. And at that point, the veil is very thin because it's like you're sort of you're releasing, but you're also kind of like open to higher levels of insights and visions. And they talk about this in ancient times. Women, when they were bleeding, they would kind of put them in another place because they had to either go into their visions, or they weren't really, they couldn't mix and mingle with everybody else. They were in a different state.
Yes.
And so there is that when we feel like we're just in the download mode, like when you've just got download after download, you're just like getting the visions, you're getting the ideas, and you don't really feel like doing anything.
Yeah.
That's the beginning of a cycle. And it's that part of the cycle has nothing to do with action. It's all about like receiving the visions, the insights, and the ideas, like basically conceiving.
Yes.
You're letting things come in. So that's the beginning of the cycle. Then it starts to move into, once you stop bleeding, all of a sudden there's a natural tendency. It's like, oh my gosh, I want to do something now. It's like the energy just kicks in. And when the energy and action is fueled by the vision, that's where magnetism comes in. And magnetism makes us attractive, which then leads to that ovulation phase where it's like now because you've taken action, your body is now moving in sync with your visions and dreams. You're acting on it, like you're calling people. It's like, or you're working on a painting, you're working on your book, you're doing things that were fed to you through the visions of your bleeding time. And then that action makes you very attractive because basically that higher frequency energy is now fueling your body. So you become very beautiful. And everyone will know at certain times they just like, wow, I look so great. And other times like, oh, I look horrible. Well, that ovulation time, basically you've been fueled by your soul frequency. And that's what makes someone super attractive. Their skin just glows, their eyes look beautiful. They're just ready to, be admired and looked at and all that kind of stuff. So that would then lead into the full moon, this fullness, this ripening. And then from that place, it's like now you're ready to receive, almost like a mother. It almost moves into, it's like you're open, and then it goes into the maiden, and then it goes into mother. And
Yes.
mother is this place where now you're receiving energies. And, potentially if you were to get pregnant, that would be the time physically, but also on the idea of creativity. It's a time that you can receive, like you can let in the support necessary for your ideas to fully manifest and ripen. Okay. And so then from
Mm.
there, after we ovulate, there's a little bit of like the energy starts coming back down again. And this is the waning of the moon. It starts coming down and it moves into like the crone energy and then the shamana where it starts going into like the darker reflective. It's like, wow, how am I now integrating everything that I just journeyed through? I kind of took all these actions, I attracted things, and now it's like I'm letting them sort of steep in the soil of my being. And then if there's going to be a baby, that it starts to grow, or there's a shedding and then the cycle starts again. So it's like we're moving through this. And so we can watch the moon and learn from that, but really we can just listen to our body. What do you feel like doing?
Yes. Yeah.
What do you feel like doing? Because your body is going to guide you. Sometimes you feel like being a blob and binging out on Netflix. Well, you're probably in a place where you just need to receive like downloads of ideas and inspiration. And it's not about action. So just surrender to it. And other times like, oh my gosh, I want to do everything. I got to do this. I got 20 things on my list. I want to go, and you're like, you're going. And so if we let ourselves do that, we're in our cycle. But a lot of times in the way our structure of society is designed, we don't always have the ability to even listen because we have to be somewhere
Yeah.
or we have to do something according to some schedule. And so we're kind of disconnected from the listening. And so in many ways, children and women in menopause, because they're in a place where their schedule is a little more free, they actually have the potential to even listen more than a woman who is bleeding because they're not in that sort of the career years type of thing where they're in those structures that are so demanding. And so, we all have our advantages, wherever we are, there's an advantage. And sometimes there is a bit of a challenge to it as well. And for each of us, the challenge is just learning to listen, learning to listen.
So true, isn't it? And often that ability to connect in with our own innate nature can be really facilitated by going out and connecting with Mother Nature and the physical world to really help us tap into that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes, for sure. Yeah, nature is such a partner in remembering just the naturalness of ourself. Returning to nature within ourself. What is our true nature?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so, wow, yeah, just such a big topic and so exciting. So, can you share with us a little bit about then how you started a practice of connecting more with the menstrual blood and, the creative richness within that?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's something that I never would have thought I would be one to eat the blood or go to the levels that I have gone to with it. But little bit by little bit, I was learning. And with each bit that I learned, it sort of opened the next door. And the next door, you go deeper and deeper and deeper until eventually there's the point where now I'm literally eating the blood. And the reason why I am at that place now and why I do that is that the menstrual blood itself is a blood biologically that is designed to support life.
Yeah.
A lot of people think of the menstrual blood as a dirty thing that's like you have your period and it get rid of it, But the truth is that it's far from dirty. In fact, the only reason it's being released from the body is because that cycle is complete and there was no physical baby that blood was going to be used to feed its growth for 9 months. And so when we bleed, if we are wanting to create a creative project, we can feed that creative project with the nutrient-dense blood that was in our womb.
Yeah.
And so when I eat it, I do it very consciously and kind of like a ritual when I'm working on projects like the Yoni Art Project or International Soul Art Day or the New Icon Movie or the Global Vision Quest, like these massive global projects that I've created. I'll consume my blood to support me to be able to birth those projects. So I do it in a very conscious way and I do work with my cycle and I work with, the moon. I allow all forces to help me. It's like I'm going to do whatever I can to enhance the pleasure and the possibility of my dreams becoming reality. So
Yes, so
eating the blood
powerful.
is, yeah,
And
eating the blood is just a support in that process of birthing our creative dreams into reality.
And so, do you just use that, like, say, a teaspoon in some water and like take it like an essence or a tincture that way? Because I know a lot, no, but I know a lot of people sort of
Yeah.
work with it like that, and that's how I've experienced it. And then also often, using it to return to the earth in a ritual that way, offering it back as part of that natural cycle, like, say, under a special tree or a plant or, somewhere in nature that's really special to somebody.
hmm So in order to do those things, a woman would need to have like one of those diva cups
Mm,
inside to collect the blood. I don't like using those things.
yeah.
um, and it's a preference thing. I have nothing against them. I don't think that they're bad or wrong or anything like that. Anytime that I've attempted to use one, my body said no. And so for me, the collecting of the blood, for those who, have the cup, then it's easy to then figure out, well, where do I want to do with it? Do I want to eat it? Do I want to put it in a smoothie? Do I want to give it to the earth or a plant?
Yeah.
So they have this quantity to work with. So I don't use it in that particular way, but the things that I do, I often go to the bathroom in nature if I'm bleeding so that I'm actually kind of, leaving an offering.
Yes.
And I hike every day. I'm in Canada, so I'm like surrounded by forests and I'm out in nature all the time. And so I have special spots that I go to and I will literally like go to the bathroom and kind of like sit there for a while so I can bleed to offer it to the earth. So that's
Yes.
something that I do. When I'm going to eat it, I actually will sit on a surface that I can then use almost like a plate, and I'll sit on it for an amount of time, typically on my first day of bleeding because it's very heavy, and I'm in meditation, pretty much opening up the ritual of what is this blood for? Like, why am I collecting it? What do I want to use it for? And I can be sitting there up to an hour. Sometimes I'm reading or I might be doing something as well, but I'm there for a period of time until I have like literally collected an amount of the blood that I want to use. And then either I'll just lick it up. Sounds very primal, but I do. I just sometimes will lick it up. Sometimes I have put things in smoothies.
Yeah.
But I would say my go-to thing is lick it. And after I have been in like a meditation for about an hour, I'm really in the zone, and I've been meditating on like what is this blood for? And so it's like I'm ready to consume it. I've prepared myself on so many levels. It's like I want it. So it becomes very pleasurable to me. But I know a lot of women use the Diva cups and then they put them in their
Yeah.
smoothies, do all kinds of stuff.
And I
So
know
it's like whatever works. Yeah.
I know people, I've got a friend who uses, like recyclable pads. And then what she does is she rinses it with the water and then she collects it in that way because she doesn't like using the cups either. So that's another way, if you don't want to use a cup, you can use those recyclable pads and kind of rinse through with like fresh water that way as well.
Mm-hmm. Yep, for sure.
So it's really about what works for each individual woman, isn't it? And what you feel comfortable with. And you just reminded me as well, I know like, women who really practice like free bleeding as well, where they might have a special chair or something that they use for during that time. Like you said, like to meditate on the first day where they can just
Mm-hmm.
allow that to flow without stopping the flow and then create a ritual around that. And then of course they can, it's like a special plastic chair or something like that where it's
Mm-hmm.
easy, so it's not going to stain it permanently, and they can just kind of, make it part of a process that they're going through.
Mm-hmm, for sure. And actually, I would add as well that pretty much all of my art has blood in it because I've either sat on the canvases or I have, in some way, I've included my blood in pretty much every creation, costumes in the different fabrics. So to me, it's all very intentional. Like I
Yes.
really think that there's the menstrual blood holds the capacity to create and support life. And
Mm.
so when I'm creating art and I want that art to be like opening up a portal to a world for myself or for people who are going to look at it, I'm going to do everything I can to feed that and give it the nutrients it needs to be what it can be. And so, yeah, the blood, we could probably go into that a lot.
There's so much richness though.
For sure. Yes, absolutely.
And so what do you believe about, the connection between sex, money, and menstrual blood? Because obviously these are all taboo topics, aren't they? And so what do you see as the connection between those and what they have in common?
I feel like they're all about circulation. And if we look at the sacral chakra, which is also then connected with the womb, the sacral chakra, a lot of people say, oh, it's about money, it's about creativity. But whenever I tune into that chakra, I always see it as a figure eight. It's like it's moving. And so I'm like, okay, this is really about circulation. And if we look at creativity, it's circulation between invisible and real. If we look at sex, it's circulation between energies of people. So with the sacral chakra, it is all about circulation of energy. And so when we're wanting to create something, we are circulating energy, something from an idea to reality. And when we're having sex, there's a circulation of energies between masculine and feminine, or feminine and feminine, whatever someone's sexual energy preferences are. And then with money, there's also a circulation from one woman or man to another woman or man. There's energy that is moving. And so when we're wanting to, connect with money, we're wanting to connect with creativity, our menstrual blood, our womb, sexuality, all these things, really we're looking at the circulation of energy, which actually brings us full circle to the very beginning of our conversation, this idea of what creates blocks and how can we deal with them. And so to loop it back to that, so, kind of tie this off in a really beautiful way, is that when we're wanting to increase our financial abundance, or we're wanting to increase our sexual potency or magnetism, or we're wanting to increase our creative capacity, we need to look at how is our energy moving? Is it in our natural flow, or have we edited it or denatured it to accommodate something and kind of disembodied ourselves? And when we've disembodied ourselves in some way and we sort of sidestep our truth, we're not in our circulation channel. And so we can't actually increase our creative capacity from that place. We can't increase our money from that place because we're not even in the channel. We're not even in the circulation loop. So the first step for all those different topics, they're all interconnected in a way, is just how can we allow our circulation? How can we allow our natural desires, our natural instinct, our natural passions, and what we're drawn to, what is our truth? How can we allow it to move through us? How can we honor it and respect it and voice it and speak it and design our life around it? That's why I'm such a fan. And one of the things that I teach and speak a lot about is how to create a thriving career, making lots of money, being yourself.
Yes.
Because I really don't believe you can make money doing things that are not in your truth, but it won't be thriving.
Yes.
Because you won't feel the circulation of the life force energy in it. But if someone wants to thrive and be themselves and make money, they've got to be able to be themselves, which is a journey of healing, unnumbing, bringing ourselves back into our body, trusting ourselves, giving ourselves permission to be in our own flow, be in our own cycle. And so really that this whole conversation, like the essence of what we're speaking about, is how to connect with your true nature and allow that to be the guiding, navigating force in your life.
Exactly. And having that complete honesty with yourself about who you are and who you are not.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because until we can really harness that for ourselves, it's impossible for us to have really honest, deep, intimate connections with other people, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, because we're always, like watching out for, well, how are they reacting to me? And almost like letting the other person decide who you are. And it never feels good. And we don't even need to always know these things. All we need to really do is like, does it feel good? Does it feel like you are being yourself? Or does it feel like sort of trying to be something. And that's the clue right there. It's either you're on your unique life force track or you're not. And yes, there's varying degrees to it, and we build up courage and that resilience that it takes to be on your true path. Like that takes courage, because the reason it takes courage is because no one else has lived your path, which means there's no example to follow.
Yeah.
And so when there's no example to follow, we have no proof that it's good enough. We have no proof that it's going to work. And so it does take a lot of courage and the ability to be like, well, you know what? This is what I feel. So this is my right path. That's a courageous act. And the ones who are thriving and orgasmic and enjoying their lives, even in the challenges, that's a base level of belief system and choice that they are consistently taking, where it's like, I'm going to listen to my truth and I'm going to act on it. And, sometimes, everybody falls off the wagon of that. But in general, the ones who are thriving and happy and satisfied and feeling the fullness in their life, that is a foundational belief that is the undertone of that.
That's right. And that ability and willingness to take risks, to expand the comfort zone, even though fear and anxiety and all of these things come up, but it's still about taking the chance anyway and just following what feels right for you, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. And learning along the way, like, going through what it takes to heal, face the fears, unnumb those areas, unfreeze them, create the safety. It sounds simple, like, follow your bliss. It sounds simple. And I am a total believer that is the path for each person. And yet the reality of that is there's so many layers of learning in that. And just the fierce bravery
and unlearning
and unlearning. Yes. Yeah. That really requires is like, that to me is the hero or heroine's path to live that life. And it's the path where you're unique. You're part of the ecosystem. You're not like an island, like you're unique, like you're separate from people, but you're unique in that you offer something that is special to the ecosystem because you have your own perspective and you have your own truth and your own thoughts. So you actually contribute at a much higher level because you're in the gift that you're here to give.
So true. And honestly, Laura, I could listen to you all day. And I so agree. I so resonate with everything that you shared. And it's just such an exciting time that we're at as women, really moving into much more of who we are and anchoring and grounding this much more deeply as a collective, I feel.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so, Laura, I know that one of the projects that you're involved in is that you started an International Soul Art Day. And so are you able to share a little bit about that and where people can find out more about you and your work online?
Mm-hmm. So I'm always working on creative projects. I'm very fertile and very prolific.
No surprise.
So there's always a lot going on. And so the best place to see what I'm working on is at my website, lauraholic.com. But one of the things in relation to the conversation that we've been speaking about around like the yoni and the womb and creative energy, really, I have one thing that I'd love to share is a quiz that I created called What is Your Yoni Personality Type? And it's a quiz that's on my site. And basically, it kind of allows each person to understand their unique flavor of how do they process energy. Yeah. And that's a beautiful base for things like International Soul Art Day, when then you're going to, create things and make art, to be able to have that respect for yourself of like, how do you enter creative energy? How do you enter life force energy? So I would really recommend people checking out that quiz if they're curious.
Yes, it's great. I did it. I loved it. I was the Divine Mother energy. I loved it.
Oh, yes. Oh, beautiful. Yeah. And, what's interesting too with the quiz, if you do it at different times of the month, I fluctuate between two of the personality types. And so depending of where I am in my cycle, my Yoni personality shifts.
Yes.
People might discover that for themselves as well. And again, it's just a reflection of the creative process where we access different flavors of ourselves at
Yes.
different points in our cycle. So that's an experiment as well. And then with International Soul Art Day, so this year it's coming up. It's on May the 25th. And it's a global day. Tens of thousands of people from all over the world connect virtually for the day to create art together for the day. And I guide a soul art journey, which is a process of connecting with your soul and then being able to express that through some kind of art. And it doesn't require any art skill or experience. You work with whatever medium works for you, which could even be like food or gardening or collage or painting, or, it could be designing an outfit. So I guide a process for people to connect with their soul and then allow their soul to guide them as to how does it want to express itself. So International Soul Art Day is a great way to kind of get a taste of that way of approaching art and creativity as really a soul journey. Brilliant. And a way to allow your soul to be expressed in this reality.
Perfect. I love the sound of that, and I'm really looking forward to it. Because that group energy where there's so many people focusing at the one time, I mean, it will be really interesting, I guess, for you to hear feedback of how people go with that and see all these amazing things that people are creating.
Yeah, well, this is our 7th year doing it. And so over the years, it's been amazing to witness. And we have an International Soul Art Day gallery where there's just hundreds of people who've submitted art pieces from all over the world that they've created on International Soul Art Day. And it just blows my mind, the level of depth that people go to from all over the world. Like literally, I'm like, wow, there's someone in, like Jerusalem and Israel. Like there's all these places that I was like, wow, like you're here on International Soul Art Day and in Africa and South America. I mean, it just goes on. And yet the common thread is that everybody has like a spiritual essence. And it wants to be expressed, like it wants to come through, and it has so much to offer them. And so it is a magical day. And I find the vortex of all these, tens of thousands of people gathering amplifies the creative process for everybody. So I feel like whatever I create on Soul Art Day, in fact, it's funny, one of the years, so 2 years ago, for whatever reason, I ended up creating this giant yoni. And at that point, I wasn't really, I wasn't teaching about the yoni. I was just like, wow, I just made a giant yoni. And we all kind of giggled about it. We're like, what? And then I came out with the Yoni Art Project. So I find it to be a very visionary time because everything's so amplified that it really, I find, foreshadows like the next year of what wants to be created through you. Wow. So it's really, really very magical. So I would definitely, if people are feeling like, oh, I want to check it out, it is a free event, and the information, people get onto my website. That's where I share things through my newsletter and things like that. So people can stay updated that way. But for the moment, before we head into Soul Art Day, a great way to get started is with the Yoni quiz.
Yes, definitely. Definitely recommend that. So, well, thank you for sharing all of that. And thank you so much for your time. And I must get to one of your in-person events at some point, definitely.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you for listening to Unclassified Woman. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe. For information on events and services, connect with Michelle at michellemariemcgrath.com.